Douglas County considers seizing land from Denver in retaliation for gun control laws. Avs game day traffic will highlight a problem CDOT admits it does not have the money to fix. We learn about the legal advice that was given back to the CU visiting scholar who was trying to tell Team Trump how to overthrow American democracy.
Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life.
What is it about DIA that makes the airport tornado bait? And hockey fans are intense, like in a good way. We celebrate the most artistic Avs fans we've been able to find. On Next. This time tomorrow, I-25 from Alameda to Auraria will be gridlock. The Colorado Avalanche, hosting Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, will highlight a traffic problem that CDOT had hoped to fix. Bumper-to-bumper cars on that section of interstate through town that's kind of squeezed between the river and railroad. CDOT was forced to scrap a plan to expand the highway there. Our Marshall Zellinger found transit groups celebrating that. If not a Stanley Cup, the biggest win that they've had in a while.
When CDOT bought Burnham Yard, the rail property right next to I-25 in central Denver, it was bought to expand the highway and create new rail and transit options. CDOT cannot do one of those anymore.
And it was welcome news to see CDOT take I-25 expansion off the table for the next 5 years. We really thank them for that. Now it's time to go the next step and remove it from the 10-year plan.
Several groups that support alternative forms of transportation, bus and bike, want CDOT to announce it will not seek highway expansion as part of a 10-year plan that it finalizes in August. The thing is, CDOT has already backed off expanding I-25 through central Denver, though it's still moving ahead with plans to move the railroad for a passenger rail line from Pueblo to Fort Collins. In April, CDOT Director Shoshana Liu sent a letter to the state's Office of Economic Development, which helped CDOT buy Burnham Yard. In that letter, she wrote, CDOT has also determined that the funds do not exist for the widening of I-25 between 6th Avenue and Alameda Avenue, and that only relocating the railroad off I-25 must be studied.
And so we're here again to urge CDOT to take I-25 widening off of the 10-year plan, reinvest those funds in alternate transportation methods.
This is CDOT's 10-year plan, which we are already 3 years into. The first item on the list is the Burnham Yard property, though it no longer includes expanding I-25.
So right now the plan kind of reads like a menu where highway projects are the entrees.
Molly McKinley with Denver Streets Partnership wants CDOT to focus on other transit options, though the 10-year plan does have 10 pages of highway and transit projects statewide.
We need projects that think about moving people, not just cars.
In a statement, CDOT's director wrote, "We appreciate the concerns being raised today and will continue to take those into account as the new plan goes through its next steps." For Next, I'm Marshall Zellinger.
CDOT's 10-year plan update also has to take into account ways to limit greenhouse gases. Although CDOT claims online in its frequently asked questions that it thinks highway expansion can still happen while achieving that goal. Douglas County's Republican commissioners are looking to take land from the city of Denver in retaliation for Denver's gun control laws. The land that DougCo might seize is Daniels Park, the 1,000 acres near Castle Pines, land that the city of Denver has owned for almost a century. This idea came up quietly and quite suddenly at a DougCo commissioners' work session yesterday. Commissioner George Teal was kind of cagey during the meeting about why he wanted DougCo to take over Daniels Park. The land has a historic ranch, it has part of the city's bison herd. It's also a place where the Native community holds celebrations and ceremonies. Fellow Republican Commissioner Laura Thomas outed Commissioner Teal's motivations to take the land. She quoted from his Facebook posting in a closed group for DougCo conservatives where Commissioner Teal suggested seizing that land through eminent domain because Denver had just banned concealed carry in its parks. Listen to just how nonchalantly the Battle of Daniels Park began at yesterday's DougCo commissioners' work session.
Yeah, so I wonder, I'd like to request an executive session specifically for the purposes of receiving legal advice on proceeding with taking action to bring Daniels Park into Douglas County ownership.
Commissioner Teal did not respond to our request for comment. His idea advanced to an exploratory stage with the support of fellow Republican Commissioner Abe Lyden. Commissioner Laura Thomas voted against it. She said an expensive legal battle with Denver over politics is not productive. The head of Denver Parks and Rec told us that Commissioner Teal just hadn't done his homework.
They have done an incredible job working with us to improve this park for everybody in the region. And if there was an issue, if there was a commissioner that had an issue, it would have been nice that they would have reached out to somebody in Denver besides going on social media and, just doing what people do nowadays instead of really communicating. It would have been nice to have someone really reach out to us and talk to us.
As for the new concealed carry ban in all of Denver's parks, both city parks and the mountain parks that are spread out in other counties, Scott Gilmore, who you saw there from Denver Parks and Rec, said they weren't even thinking about posting notices of the new ordinance in Denver's mountain parks at this point. Right now, they're focusing on the city parks. We know that it was actually the Democratic Governors Association meddling in the Republican primary for governor, trying to influence who Democratic Governor Jared Polis faces in November. So last week, we pulled back the curtain on this political ad that calls Republican gubernatorial candidate Greg Lopez too conservative. It's really an ad to encourage Republican primary voters to go with Lopez. The Colorado Sun's Sandra Fish was the first to track down the money behind this ad. It was the Democratic Governors Association that gave $1.5 million to a Colorado committee, which then gave $600,000 to that group responsible for the Lopez ad. Democrats are playing similar games with an ad designed to boost Republican U.S. Senate candidate Ron Hanks, similarly saying he's too conservative. It's clear that Democratic groups think that Lopez and Hanks would be the easier candidates to beat come November. Testimony just released by the January 6th committee today shows the CU visiting professor who advised President Trump on how to overturn the election got some legal advice back at him. Trump's attorney told John Eastman that he better get himself a good criminal defense attorney after Eastman tried to overthrow American democracy. Eastman wrote the Trump team's outline on how to throw out the election results and keep Trump in power, the blueprint that Vice President Mike Pence refused to follow. Eastman was a visiting scholar at CU. He spoke at the Trump rally right before the attack on the Capitol. One of President Trump's own White House lawyers, Eric Hirschman, testified to the committee that he talked to Eastman the day after the insurrection. Hirschman said that he told Professor Eastman, quote, "Are you out of your blanking mind?" and then offered him some free legal advice.
He said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. And I screamed and said, I don't want to hear any other effing words coming out of your mouth, no matter what, other than orderly transition. Repeat those words to me. And I screamed that, and he said, eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it.
The January 6th committee has laid out extensive testimony showing that key figures inside Trump's team knew that the election rigging claims were lies, yet they were still pushing them in public. Denver's newest sanctioned camping site opens later this month in the city's Barnum neighborhood. Colorado Village Collaborative, the nonprofit behind those sites, is looking for volunteers to get it set up. The location at Regis University is closing, and it's moving to land owned by the St. Francis Center. Last week, volunteers started preparing platforms for the tents. They were working for a while at the Regis location, while the new location got a fresh coat of asphalt. Colorado Village Collaborative is holding more volunteer events starting on Wednesday. All are welcome. There's volunteer info on their website. As the Avs get ready for the Stanley Cup final against the Lightning tomorrow night, we have found the most ridiculous piece of hockey trivia for you to impress your friends. Stanley Cup final between your Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning will be the first final in NHL history between two teams with names that don't end in the letter S. Avalanche, the first team without an S at the end of their name to play in the finals. That was back in 1996. Second team to do it, Tampa Bay Lightning in 2004. And now they will make stupid stat history together when they face off in Game 1 tomorrow night with no S's.
More and more younger kids are getting addicted to opiates, which means they need treatment tailored to a younger age.
Look, we're not trying to save anybody. I'm not trying to save anybody. I'm trying to teach them how to save themselves.
You tell us that it seems like DIA sees a lot of tornadoes getting uncomfortably close. We look at how it compares to other airports in Tornado Alley. Next.
So many services seem to shrink during the pandemic. We know, sadly, that opioid addiction did not drop in that time. Youth Recovery Group says its numbers have doubled in the last 2 years, and they're seeing more and more younger kids addicted to opiates. Our Courtney Yoon shows us how Full Circle is helping to meet the growing need of young people seeking recovery.
It's a phrase that we kind of commonly use here is that, I don't have a drug problem, I have a me problem.
Getting high and self-harm was a short-term solution for a long-term problem.
And sometimes, especially with substance abuse, you have a hard time loving yourself.
Keegan Pyron smoked pot for the first time at age 11. Eventually, he was doing fentanyl and methamphetamines.
If I can't have a plan to keep using, I have to live here. I have to be here, I have to be in the moment.
Now he's 17 years old and more than 8 months sober, with the help of a support group called Full Circle.
If you take away getting high, you take away self-harm, you take away these things that are making me feel whole, you know how I feel? Empty.
Program Director Ben Stinser says if you want to get sober, what you do next has to be a sufficient substitute.
The goal is to provide them with something that's equally as exciting or as visceral as that lifestyle can be prior to coming into the program.
Ben says this group isn't therapy and it's not treatment.
But I think one of the most important aspects of the program is that it's fun.
For people 13 to 25 years old, they provide a range of activities, sober social events, and people who can relate to an addict's struggle. Ben got sober when he was 17, just like Keegan.
Look, we're not trying to save anybody. I'm not trying to save anybody. I'm trying to teach them how to save themselves.
They attack the problem in peer-to-peer and parent-to-parent support groups.
I sit down with someone who hasn't lived that and tell them some of the things I've done, and they cry. I sit down with him and he laughs.
Keegan now uses the tools he's learned here, honesty and patience, so he can be the best version of himself. He says he doesn't search for happiness anymore, but rather he searches for the ability to be happy, sad, or angry.
Letting myself feel these things and letting them go as they're supposed to. And that's what I look for. And that's what I live for.
There are 97 teens who participate in Full Circle right now, and the group wants to help more. If you're a clinician or a therapist and have patients seeking recovery support, Full Circle offers help to families at no cost. Kyle.
And I think, Courtney, as we think about the face of the opioid epidemic, it's not often the face of somebody that some would consider to be a child or at least a young person, but we know that they truly are affected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year, 35 kids in the state of Colorado died from a fentanyl overdose. Those were kids that were 10 to 18 years old. For Full Circle, they're seeing more and younger children coming into their support group, even their age range from 18 to 25. Those people who are coming into their support group, they've already been to treatment 5 or 6 times and, have tried to get sober 5 or 6 times. It's just something that just keeps growing, this epidemic.
Wow, teens and preteens. Difficult story, but Courtney, good to have you on next for the first time.
Thanks, Kyle.
It seems like every summer we're hearing about tornadoes near DIA. You wanted to know how common they are? We found you an answer. And some deeply dedicated fandom a day ahead of the Stanley Cup final is the most hockey fan thing we saw today. Next.
The Rainbow family's coming to far northwest Colorado. If you are not familiar with them, it's quite the scene. We first told you about the Rainbow Family Gathering back in March. This is a yearly countercultural kind of like pop-up gathering. Potentially tens of thousands of people converging on a forest somewhere. Picture like, earthy types playing music and dancing and stuff like that. Rumors had been swirling online that they were going to come to Colorado somewhere for this year's event. The group confirmed today on its Facebook page its 50th annual gathering will be near Craig, Colorado, so Adams Park in the Routt National Forest. No exact date that everybody will descend on the forest, but the post indicates it'll happen in the next week or two.
Can we talk about these views? Bright and blue. Yes, we can actually see the mountains, the foothills in the distance. That smoke and haze pushed away courtesy of the cold front that rolled through late last night. Temperatures dropping off quite a bit. We're 15 degrees cooler here in Denver compared to this time yesterday. Cooler, of course, across the eastern plains. Look at Sydney, 44 degrees cooler than yesterday. Still quite warm up there. Temperatures this afternoon holding steady in the mid-80s. Pretty typical for this time of the year. Some 90s, however, around Pueblo, through Lamar, and Trinidad. Tonight, I am tracking a couple of isolated showers out there around Akron. Just a little bit of light rain. Most of the action, however, now positioned around I-80 through parts of the panhandle of Nebraska. This ridge of high pressure, though, starts creeping back in closer to Colorado. So you know the drill. here we go again. The 90s, they will be back. We get one more brief break from that heat. Tomorrow with the sunshine, highs will top off in the mid to upper 80s once again. 60s and 70s up in the high country, but the 90s are back Thursday, close to triple digits Friday, with a good chance of storms on Father's Day and into early next week.
It seems like severe weather harshes the airport's mellow a lot. Tornadoes are always stalling arrivals and departures at DIA. There's a landspout there over the weekend. A few of you have reached out recently asking if our airport is more prone to tornado-related cancellations than any other airport. Our meteorologist Chris Bianchi checked on your hunch.
It's kind of a familiar sight at this point, right? A tornado at DIA, passengers running around hurriedly, viral photos and videos of yet another Denver airport area tornado. It happened in 2012, in 2013, and it happened again on Sunday. In fact, since the airport opened back in 1995, at least 5 tornadoes have touched down on or near DIA. And since 1975, 26 tornadoes have touched down on or within 5 miles of the airport. That's more than really tornado-prone airports like Dallas, Oklahoma City, Wichita, and Tulsa, amongst others.
And there's both geography and meteorology behind the fact that DIA and areas around it are prone to getting tornadoes. DIA, of course, sits on the east side of the Denver metro area, which makes it prone to getting the converging winds from the Denver cyclone.
Now, if DIA being something of a tornado magnet scares you, I wouldn't panic. There are 0 known fatalities or injuries with any Denver airport area tornado. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take a tornado warning seriously, but it just means the type of tornado that the airport usually gets is weak and short-lived. They're called landspouts, and they usually won't last more than 5 or 10 minutes, tops.
But since everyone seems to love a good old-fashioned DIA conspiracy theory, here's another one. Tornadoes sure seem to love DIA and areas right around it.
The conspiracy theory and the science, both from Bianchi. We've got a twist on an old favorite, this most hockey fan thing we saw today, plus your feedback next. Painting a giant Avs logo on your front lawn before the Stanley Cup Finals? Yes, that is the most hockey fan thing we saw today. Made up the segment thanks to Sylvia's husband, Rob, who did this to their front lawn in Parker. That's spectacular. Sylvia says first he did the lawnmower to cut the logo into the grass. Then he spray painted it. That is hardcore. Go Rob, go Avs. And look what Sandy did in enemy territory last week. She's a sand artist, originally from Denver. Now she lives in Tampa Bay. She went out in low tide and created this work of art on one of the beaches there. She says that she's a diehard Avs fan, fell in love with the Lightning since she moved to Florida 4 years ago. Now says seeing them play each other is her dream Cup final. I can't wait to see the reaction of somebody walking out on the beach and finding that in Tampa. Send us the hockey fan things you see around town over the next week or two. Next at 9news.com is the email or the hashtag HeyNext. Mark notes that when the location for the new DIA was announced back in the late 80s, locals pointed out that was Tornado Alley. I don't doubt that at all. Good thing, as Chris Bianchi noted, their weak sauce. Rachel says of Douglas County commissioners looking at seizing Daniels Park from Denver in retaliation for gun laws. This is the weakest game of Risk I have ever seen. We'll see you next time.